our last speaker, Victor Dover. Many of you might have heard of him. He's Imagine the Streets You Love to tour. You can see his structure throughout South Miami. His vision for growth pertains to cities, communities, most of all trees. Welcome his vision. Without further ado, Victor Dover.
All right, it's late. Repeat after me. Trees are good, y'all. Trees are good. Now for the details. I have some habits. One of my habits, because I travel a lot for work as an urban designer, is running and biking and swimming crazy long distances. So I've gotten in the habit of using runs and rides in the places I visit to size them up for their walkability and their cycle friendliness and all these things we want to check out before we try to draw a plan for a town. And it's a fun job because we're kind of in the before and after business. We can help people visualize change before it occurs. Well, it's pretty complicated because there's all these subjects. Urban design's a holistic matter. We have to simultaneously think about things like the zoning and the buildings and the engineering and the traffic and the bridges and the sewers and the parking and the parking and the parking. I've come to the conclusion after a long time of doing this that there is one little detail that matters a whole lot, and it's the tree. And not just any kind of tree, but a particular kind of tree that when we remember to include it in the thinking about all those things that matter, and when we get it right, can make the most difference. And that special kind of tree is the street tree. Speaking of momentum, I took this photograph when it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit in Stockholm. And this guy, on his daily bike commute, he wasn't dressed for a workout, he was dressed to get to work, was whistling as he rode down this allée of trees. This is in Stockholm. And I stood there shivering, taking the picture, and I thought to myself, this is his daily commute. Now, sometimes people sing to the radio when they're stuck on the Palmetto Expressway or the Florida's Turnpike on the way to work, sitting behind the wheel. How many people are having the joyous experience this guy was having? And what makes him get up and break his own inertia, his own starting friction, and start moving down? It's the experience that he has in that most mundane of things, his daily commute. And that momentum is created by the gift somebody gave him by drawing 2 lines parallel to each other on a map and planting trees in a row. Not too complicated, right? So let's look at what happens. It turns out all these things do matter. Architecture still matters. It matters a lot. And we build communities partly because we need the spaces inside those buildings to carry on our daily activities. But the spaces between the buildings, the architecture of the community, the public realm, most importantly, the streets, are actually where we get our impressions of places and where we do our moving between places and where we meet one another. And we experience the public realm the most. So in that public realm, the street tree is incredibly important. A wise man named John Nolan, who actually did a lot of designs for Florida in the 1920s, had the idea for this street that they would plant native species trees that didn't require a lot of irrigation. He picked the trees that grew in that particular part of the Piedmont in North Carolina, and he said, we're going to plant the trees first, long before anybody comes along to do the buildings, before anything else. Because someday, people, as they share this road, will have the experience of traveling through a climax forest. And it's like they're moving through a Gothic cathedral with the ceiling overhead provided not by buildings, but by the trees. Now, it hit me here. I had lived in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, beautiful place, and then parachuted into Miami with my business partner, Joseph Kohl. We went to school at the University of Miami, and we lived in the asphalt land called Dadeland area. And in the 1980s, the University of Miami campus wasn't the beautiful place that it is now. I mean, today it feels like your classrooms and laboratories are in a tropical garden. But in those days, it was more like buildings poking out of parking lots. But we would leave the campus and we would venture into the city of Coral Gables and discover streets like this one in Coral Way, on Coral Way. This was where it hit me, that someone had actually designed it to be like this, that they had actually taken action to cause it to turn out this way. And that person, in the case of Coral Gables, was George Merrick, founder of the town. Merrick did something pretty amazing for his time. In the course of 7 years, he planted 30,000 trees. The vast majority of them shade trees that shade those streets. 30,000. Now we have 38,000. 38,000 trees is a lot of trees. If you line them up end to end, they would stretch about 40 feet apart. They would, like those on Coral Way, they would stretch from Key Largo to Orlando. It's a lot of trees. And look at what happened as a result. It actually created more than just shade for sidewalks. It created addresses that were memorable and recyclable and people fell in love with. This is a street where I run regularly near our neighborhood. That's Santa Maria Street. And the buildings are wonderful. But it's the trees that make me come back to that space. It's the address that's created by the details of the street tree planted between the sidewalk and the moving cars on the street. This experience provoked me and my buddy John Massengale into writing a big fat doorstop of a book on street design. And we traveled around a lot, and we argued a lot, and we took a lot of pictures to try and get at what it was about certain streets that just really resonated with people, proved valuable, was efficient for transportation and other things. That's Riverside Drive on the west side in Manhattan. What was it about these streets? We stayed up late at night arguing about it. We took a lot of pictures, we measured. I came away with a lot of conclusions, enough to fill the big book. And we put 500 pictures in there so that citizens could go into meetings with their public works director or their mayor or the DOT and say, why can't we have a street like this one in the book? It's a little subversive idea. If you need a picture, let me know. We've got lots of them. So we concluded that we should never underestimate the power of even a single street tree to transform our experience of place. But if you plant the street tree strategically, like this one that leans in from a garden in Oxford, that simple thing changes everything about the composition of that scene. In the same way that a painter composes the canvas or a set designer composes a stage set or the frame of a film, in urban design, we're actually doing that placement of objects within the frame. And look at the genius of that single tree here, and how it changes that place. And then, when we line them up and combine them, something like magic occurs. This is one of Frederick Law Olmsted's boulevards in Buffalo, New York, named after Abraham Lincoln. It's amazing what an order-giving thing this is, and the kind of deliberateness of human action on the city. At the same time, nature coming into the city, combined in the arrangement of the street trees. By the way, a lot of cyclists in this room. The next time you're riding along, think about that person's experience compared to the one you're having on, say, the mean streets of Greater South Dade. It is with these trees and their arrangement in the frame that we create the local distinctiveness that makes a place recognizable. This is one of the beloved neighborhoods of Buenos Aires, which has a rambla in the center of the street, the trees on both sides, and the trees are like columns in that cathedral. And even in the wintertime, when it's dark and what have you, the trees frame that space in a way that makes you feel very comfortable being in that public realm. The trees help us know where we are. Like this is a scene on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and the way the light comes through the autumn leaves there just sets up a scene you know has to be Chicago. And the trees tell a story of a place. Like these are trees in Pacific Grove, California, and that end of that street is the Pacific Ocean. And the wind comes off of the ocean and it blows down that street and it actually shapes the tree into kind of like a physical 3D fixed embodiment of that movement of the wind across the land. Isn't that cool? The trees also tell us when we are, not just where we are. And so if you go to Eastern Parkway in New York, in the fall, it turns golden like that. Or if you come to the streets in South Miami at a certain time of year in the subtropics, the Royal Poinciana trees drop all that beautiful red stuff onto the floor of the public room like a red carpet for your experience. This is not South Florida. In places that have more dramatic change between the seasons, the trees actually are where that story is told visually. And something kind of neat happens when the ground turns white, because there's a high contrast that goes on, and suddenly the trees themselves become architectural again. Now, this picture was taken by my buddy John Massengale in Nantucket, and I show it because that, if you didn't know it, is a tourism-driven economy. They don't do whaling in Nantucket anymore, but they do bring millions of visitors there and encourage them to come back year after year and open their wallets and help drive the local economy. And how do they do it? By giving people an experience of place that is better. Every place that wants to accomplish that should think about these pieces of equipment we have to install, the street trees, as part of how we make that economic machine work. They're like devices that filter the light at the dawn. And they also filter the glare in the summertime that might be splashing on our storefronts or making the sidewalks less comfortable. Now, little details matter a lot. They make a big difference. Look at where this tree in the center is positioned. This is in Forest Hills Gardens. It's right at the corner where there's this tight little radius around the corner of the street. Well, let me tell you, that's not a street where you're going to go terracing around the corner at an unsafe speed. Because that tiny little corner, very tight, and that tree up close sends you a clear message that this is a community where there might be little kids playing in the street, and there might be old people trying to cross, and you're not supposed to go so fast. So it actually, the placement of the tree and the detail of how it's there is a speed control device. What do you think? Is it better than the bright yellow painted speed bumps that we go back and retrofit in parking lots and neighborhoods because people speed in them? Why is that important? Because when we think of all these components, like the tree and its placement, it's part of an ensemble that changes human behavior for the better. We can do things like get out into the space on 2 feet and on 2 wheels and share it with cars and canal boats if you want, in a way that's kind of given order. And that cyclist feels welcome in that space, partly because of the trees. And the trees are doing a lot of things at once. You get the idea? And some of it is this compositional and visual idea, but some of it is very practical, like controlling the speed of the cars or keeping you from getting sunburned when you go out for that run or that ride. There are all these things that it's simultaneously doing for us, and I won't talk about all of them, but there are a few that are particularly critical right now. One of them is that we've lost our sense of connection to permanence and to civic institutions. We tend to think very short term as an impatient culture. And trees grow slowly, and architecture is expensive. But when we put those things together, we can actually get something back from our institutions that's memorable and worth saving. There's a ceremony to it that's actually possible. And it seems to cut across cultures. Olmsted's Boulevard's on the bottom, the Avenue of the Emperors in Beijing on the top. There's myth and ritual in the way we position the objects in the frame, including the trees. We can also make infrastructure, that's a popular word these days, that's really placemaking. Once upon a time, they decided to install transportation facilities in New Orleans, and instead of installing transportation facilities, they built St. Charles Avenue, which is like a great linear park, and it happens to have a streetcar in it. And they planted the trees on the median in New Orleans. It's called the common ground. Isn't that great? It's not called a median. It's called the common neutral ground, they like to say. Neutral ground sounds like you should have a duel out there. And so all the people who live on that street and all the people who drive down that street or cycle or run down that street or use the streetcar get this great experience of the linear park, not just transportation. Or how about this? I don't know what that looks like to you, but to a lot of the people we work with, that is, as it turns out, the most beautiful parking lot in the world. It's the Avenue Diana in Paris. It has this great accessory at the end called the Arc de Triomphe. But what it actually did was use these lines of street trees to set up places where people park the cars, and you hardly even notice that there are 400 cars parked in one block there. Now compare that to the Walmart in Westchester and get back to me, okay? This is an idea that cuts across cultures and across geography. At the top is Guilin in China. That's how they meet their riverfront. On the bottom is Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. So, and this is Antigua in Guatemala, Central America. And this is Spain, that's Barcelona, where the Ramblas is like this great order-giving device that sets up the story of the city. It's also a tremendous retrofit tool for changing the place we know into the place we'd rather have. This is Greenville, South Carolina, and every one of those trees was planted within our lifetimes. And they did that to change the place, and they, in the process, brought their town back to life, and they turned the lights back on their once dead Main Street, using trees to do it. But when we look around, we think, well, everything's already built. We've run out of space. You've used it all. Where are we going to build? How are we going to accommodate a new population? All that. We have room. And if we're smart about it, we can actually use things like the trees to turn what otherwise would just seem like growth into growth that makes things better rather than worse. Where would you prefer to live? This is a test. Okay. Now, why do I think this is a particularly urgent thing in our time? Because Americans, the civilization that was once really so good at building those streets and those cities, got really bad at it for a while. Now, this is near here, but some of you recognize the businesses, but otherwise you couldn't tell. It could be South Carolina or Texas or Arizona for that matter. And not just on the commercial strip streets with their forgettable character, but on the residential streets. This is how America has been building residences, communities, or subdivisions, maybe we should say. And this is how they used to do it. Want to see that again? This is how we've been doing it recently. This is how they used to do it. Where would you prefer to live? Part of it is because of the way the whole public realm is arranged. Now, we try to get the word out that we should be safer and we should, I love that sign. We're surprised when people aren't walking here, right? But what are the messages that we send through the physical built environment in that place? Now, I have one more bad habit, which is passing out keypad polling devices in large audiences and asking them to vote on things, little credit card things with buttons on them. And we ask questions like, did your parents walk to school, walk or bike? You all heard the stories, right? Your parents told you they walked back to school 5 miles each way, in the snow, uphill both ways. You've heard that story. Just out of curiosity, in this room, how many of you had parents or grandparents who have said they used to walk or bike to school? Okay, so this is a really common response, great many of us. And then we say, okay, what about you? When you were a kid, did you do it? And the number goes down a little bit, right? This was from a recent audience of about 500 people at South Miami High School. And then we say, you know what's coming next, right? What about the kids in your neighborhood and your family now? Your kids or grandkids. Do they walk to school? And the answer turns like this. And it's almost an indication of a civilization gone mad. Not that safe routes to school is the only thing that matters, although it matters, but it's like an indicator of something gone really, really wrong. Something we can actually fix. This is not an old street. Actually, we designed this street. This is a new street. And there's a lady who's on up in years who regularly walks back and forth on this street, which was named after William Faulkner. And she couldn't do it if it didn't have those young street trees. Or, you want to see that again? Should we take a vote? I could go on at length about this street, although going on at width might seem more appropriate. True story, we asked, the traffic engineer said we didn't have room for trees. That's a true story. Now, it changes our behavior, like I said before. And it's not just what speed we tell people to drive with a sign. It's also how we design the street that changes whether people drive too fast. This is pretty darn critical. If you look at the numbers, sorry we're missing here, but the first box on the left is how many people die when there's a collision between a pedestrian and a motorist at about 20 miles per hour, and it's about 5%. And then when that goes to 30 miles per hour, the fatalities rises to above 50%. That little uptick in speed makes this huge uptick in mayhem. This is why we keep coming out in the national reports in Florida as #1. We are the best at killing pedestrians and cyclists. We're champions. This is not applause-worthy. We need to fix this. When you zoom in on the place, you find this. So when you zoom in on the map, you see that. And each of those little dots is an incident, an injury-causing or fatality-causing collision. And those maps are pretty amazing. You zoom in further, you can actually see what happened in each and every one of them. Here's why. Because we don't build place streets where walking and biking and using transit are assumed to be normal parts of community life. I don't give up on streets like US 1. Why should we? We can take the places that we know and turn them into places we would rather have. Why not? Now, the Complete Streets movement in our country is actually working pretty hard at sometimes awkwardly reintegrating walking, biking, and transit into the world of our streets. Here's a complete street in Fort Lauderdale. What do you think? Not complete. Missing something. What is it? Okay, thank you. You heard it from me. If it's not a beautiful street, it's not a complete street. But we're working on it. Obviously, we're trying to get better at it. So we need to study the way mature civilizations have been making complete streets. Here's how walking, biking, driving, transit, selling people things are all mixed in a street in Paris. And it's that tree line right in the center of everything that makes it work. It's the tree line that ends up civilizing what otherwise would just be a bunch of pavement. And we have lots of pavement waiting for us to make that change. Now, it does take time, but the founders of the favored communities in South Florida actually thought long term. When Carl Fisher was building Miami Beach and they built Espanola Way, which keeps showing up as #1 on the list of the favorite streets, it didn't have any trees, but it got trees. And it was worth evolving, and it changed into a place where people want to be even more. Now, when you get up in spacecraft and look back at Coral Gables, you can immediately pick it up. You can see where it is. Why? Because it's greener. You see that boundary? See how green it is inside the boundary and how less green it is on the north, the east, and the west? That's because of Merrick's 38,000 trees. In 1925, the French city village looked like this. And now it looks like that. And that, the French country village. If you go up into the water tower on Humber Circle, it looks like a lighthouse. In 1925, and you gaze across the horizon, this is what you see. And day before yesterday, Jessica Keller got that camera up in there and took a new picture for me. Now it looks like this. The investment takes a little while, but it changes the place and reinforces its brand. In fact, Coral Gables understands this. They have full-time urban forestry crews that are going around trimming all those trees. And what are they doing? They're adding more. 3,000 more trees will be added under the current program. They get it because it reinforces their brand. Now, one of the rules of TED Talks is that you should never use the word oxygen. Okay, so everybody just breathe with me. In, out. Okay, oxygen. We breathe this stuff, and trees make it. This is how we get it. In fact, one tree will soak up 48 pounds of carbon dioxide in a year. Varies a little according to the species, which is a lot of the CO2 that's coming out of our tailpipes and our incinerators and our smokestacks. And then it puts out enough oxygen for 2 people to breathe. Isn't that incredible? Think about it. It's a machine that does that. And even if we didn't breathe, it would be worth the money. And here's why. Lots of studies, the National Association of Realtors, the Wall Street Journal, others have found out that adding a street tree to an otherwise equal house will raise its value. And when you raise its value, you improve the tax base and you give local government more of what it needs to make things go. So if they need to buy a school bus, or they need to buy a fire engine or fix a pothole, this is the money they use to make that happen. And if they have a street tree and everything else is the same, the property is worth more. You can actually look that up. The numbers vary all over the country. A study in Portland came back and said it was like adding another couple hundred square feet to your house. So when we did a little math and saw that if in South Miami and West Miami, just in the city of South Miami alone, if you were to add a third more tree-lined streets, it would generate an improvement to the tax base equal to about $85 million. That is more than it costs to build a new high school. Think about that. Just a third more tree-lined streets, we would have the value that generates an entire new high school. So it's not like we can't afford it, and it's not like it's complicated. Our little city in South Miami has been working on it. In 1992, Dorn Avenue used to look like this. These days it looks like that and like that. So it can be done. So I leave you with this thought. When you go out into the public realm, look up at the ceiling of it and remember the humble street tree. Thank you very much.